The motivating goal for government is national well-being, which is characterized by three outcomes. These are the happiness or the prosperity of the people, peace, and order. A successful government must be predisposed to do at least two things. First, to care for the people, and second, to be truthful. There are three cardinal essentials of any government on earth. The first essential and cardinal element is that government must enable its people. Enablement. Government is an enabler. The second is that government must empower its people. Government must give empowerment. And the last outcome is that government must execute. This is where we get the word executive, because government must be involved in these three essential elements. It must enable, empower, and execute. These three effectively are the general summary of what government exists to do. In principle, no one needs experience to run government, but in practice, they must have two important qualities. The first one is the desire to do good for the people, and the last one is to devote sufficient time to governing. Governing cannot be done part-time. Whoever desires to do so must enter into it wholeheartedly and for a long haul. This is just a little excerpt I got from my latest book, which is Thinking Government. Now, this little book is barely 50 pages, and yet already on Amazon, it is bestseller #1. Now, just to give you a brief history of where I have come from. When I decided that I would launch into the deep and participate in the publishing industry, I started as what they call self-publishing enterprise. In other words, it's sort of freelance. You get your manuscript delivered to some sort of briefcase companies, and they ask you for payment. So basically, you pay for your own book to be published. And when that is done, they go through all the relevant procedures: acquisition, production, editorial, marketing, and at the end of the day, probably they distribute. You've by that time signed a contract for royalties, and probably if you are lucky, they give you 30%. For years, I never saw those 30% come to me. I could see my book trending online. I could see people accessing it through all over the world. And yet, in my own pocket, there would be nothing. So I started to think very seriously if I would compete into this industry. One thing you must remember is that there are monopolies, and these monopolies which control the publishing industry, they are known as traditional publishers. What the traditional publishers do is they may sign a contract with an author and give them money upfront, sometimes in thousands of dollars. And then, using that author's personal characteristics or popularity, they would sell globally that book, and then they'll generate a lot of money, more than what they initially paid the author. That's how they have lived. So people like me that started from nowhere, we stood no chance unless you are lucky that one of those built up and as well as household names, publishers, decided to get your book, publish it. But for some of us who had no trends in society, perhaps no gravitas in terms of politics or sociotics, or as well as probably you are settled there and you are a star, we stood no chance. But I had a vision. The vision I had was that one day I would compete with these globally established traditional publishers. I needed to take my work to somebody who would make tremendous amount of money out of my talent and skill and then give me peanuts at the end of the day. That decision, married together with when I met Dr. Munyonzo Hamalengwa, who is the Dean of the School of Law at the Zambian Open University. We had an initiative, and the initiative was to relaunch Africa in Canada Press, which became literally my goal to develop as well as popularize. So I started the campaign to start publishing my books myself. That means acquire, produce, market, distribute. It was a daunting task to be done together with these giant of publishers. But I had a vision that I would break through in one way or the other. That meant that you have to sacrifice so many things. One of the things you'd sacrifice that for a long time, you would not have a book that will become a bestseller, because best-selling is a practice that the big companies have monopolized. And it's based on sales. So the more the book sells, if it sells millions of copies, it rises to the top. I remember in 2022, I was being interviewed by a media house here in Canada. And they asked me a question: how do you wish to beat the competition? And I told them, I have a strategy. My strategy has not been used by anybody in the booking industry, that my books will advertise themselves. That's what I told them. And it was laughable. My friends are gentlemen. They didn't laugh, but they knew that what I was saying was a very difficult ideal to pursue. I say my books will reach a situation whereby they literally advertise themselves and I'll beat the market. I had a strategy, and that strategy came to pass and is coming to pass because this little book you see has reached Amazon bestseller #1 on government. Now, at this stage when I'm speaking to you, I haven't sat on the realms of government and practically govern. But in my head, I've got principles and ideals and concepts that can change any government on earth. Now, the person who is second in this category of this book on central governance was one of the greatest prime ministers in Canada. He's written a book on the same topic, on the same themes. And yet my book rose ahead of his, which means even if I have not sat on government seat, the prognosis that I have of how government must work must be certainly better. And if not, could change any government on the face of the earth. If you read this book, you stop exercising chances. You start to deal with absolutes and pragmatics. You can change any government on the face of the earth. It is bestseller, not because I am a big publishing house, but because my strategy, by the grace of God, is working. You go online, you go to Amazon and buy this little book. It's barely $7 and it can change a government and a nation. I am grateful to God for giving me this rare opportunity to start rising in the ranks of publishers and authors. Because when I checked this morning on Amazon, 3 others of my books have already also reached bestseller denominational factors. They are among the bestsellers. In fact, 3 of them are running so fast, probably by the end of this week, they will be #1s. Go to Amazon, purchase Thinking Government. Thank you.